But to do that, you need to get started with the basics. And what are some of the basics is for you to address what you know. For example, in my organization, I need to know where my critical assets are deployed. In my organization, I need to know what is the data that I'm trying to protect. To give you some examples, I need to be able to segment my entire organization into zones, critical zones, non-critical zones, working zones, non-working zones, contractor zones, regular employee activity zones, right? And that's what we call as network segmentations. So if you look at every organizations, they are adopting network segmentations. You have the DMZ zone, you have the LAN zone, you have the WAN zone, you have the inside DevOps zone. But the problem is when it comes to data contextualization, we do not educate your system that these are the zones within your organization, right? So for you to define your environment, you need to be able to educate an ideal state platform on what is your network zoning, right? So that you're telling the tool, all right, this is basically the segments from which data is going to come within the platform. Now, if you don't educate this to your platform is never going to know which is critical and non-critical based on your network segmentation. Second, you want to educate your system on what are the assets that are currently deployed within your organization, right? Is there an SSH server? What are your Active Directory servers? What is your vulnerability scanners? And the reason why we say that you need to educate your security intelligence platform with that is because you will automatically reduce false positives once you start educating your system on the type of servers that are being deployed, right? To give you an example, if I don't tell my system, hey, you know what, this is a scanner, my system is always going to throw out incidents saying there is a recon activity happening within my organization, right? So it is very, very important for us to educate our platform on the assets and the type of assets that are associated within the organization. And the third thing that we need to educate educate the platform is with user information. I need to educate my platform on who are the users that I'm currently protecting. What are the list of the top 10 critical users within my organization? What is the impact if these particular users' IDs are misused, right? So I need to ensure that I've educated the tool on user context, which is very, very important. That way I know who's a privileged user, who's a critical user, who's a regular user, and who's a contractor, right? So that when each of these users are involved in a potential incident, I immediately are able to identify, or the platform is able to identify that this particular user is part of my critical user. That means this incident requires immediate attention, right? Second, you need to have a platform. Like gone are the days where we used to throw all this data into a single store and then come up with a plan to detect advanced threats, right? But the threat landscape is constantly evolving. So you want a platform that basically consolidates all this information and has predefined templates that you can use, basically like a rule book, right? And basically gives you guidance, a set of logics that are there within the system that you could use as is, or gives you the capability to customize that and reuse it to address your custom use cases and searches, right? Now, the most important thing is we want all of that to be seamless. We want all of that to be simple, right? You don't want to have a tool that requires a lot of scripting, that requires a lot of customization, but you want to make sure that you have a platform that's really, really easy to use, is very intuitive, and even if an analyst moves on from his current role, you're still able to cope and run with that system without the need of having specialized skills in a specific coding language, right? The other thing that you may also want to add on to the platform is to make sure you are able to address specific priorities of what is acceptable traffic to me, what is not acceptable traffic to me. To give an example, any communication that's going from my LAN to a PCI zone and it's in clear text is non-acceptable to me because I will fail my PCI compliance, right? Now that's a basic policy that is within my organization. You need to have a system in place, a platform that is intelligent enough to imbibe these policies and able to give you a contextual information when it comes to incident handling, keeping all of that in mind, right? And you also want to make sure you are able to put in a risk threshold that is acceptable to you. No organization is going to be risk free, right? None of them are going to be risk free. What you can do is you need to understand what is the level of risk that is associated with each one of these assets, and what would be my remediation strategy in case something goes wrong, right? One of the key things of ensuring risk thresholds are what is an acceptable risk that I can take. Be it, let's say in my environment, I have a really crucial database server, but I cannot monitor all the critical users because my front-end applications have a hard-coded privileged user account inbuilt within the front-end application that connects back to the back-end database, right? Now, because the application has that hard-coded, it may be very difficult for you to change that within the code. But that's the risk you're taking, right? Or on the flip side, you have a countermeasure to negate that risk or reduce that risk. The countermeasure would be to make sure that that particular database that this front-end application is connecting to is constantly logging, and you are constantly monitoring that specific database for deviations from the normal using anomaly detection, right? So these are all, there are risks. Every organization has risks, but it's the level of risk that is acceptable for you is what is the threshold that you need to educate the system on. The third most important thing is to be able to adapt and to able to test efficiently and constantly improve the testing capabilities, right? And the reason why I say that is because there's no magic box today, right? A system needs to be really agile. There is no more a concept of plug and play, right? Not even in the firewalling zone where you configure a rule and forget about it. It's never going to happen. So in today's dynamic state of security, you're never going to have a security system that is a plug and play system. You need to constantly monitor and also have a platform that is agile enough to imbibe change seamlessly within the organization. It could be as simple as, am I collecting the right type of logs? Because logs change with every version, right? The end logs for our Active Directory can change from Windows version A to Windows version B. But is the level of logging today still able to meet my end goal with respect to security? Those are the things that constantly need to be monitored. Second thing is for you to test against past data. You're collecting all these information, but the problem is if you don't have the capability to take a vulnerability that is disclosed today and go back in time to actually figure out if it happened in the past, then you will never know if you've been breached in the past for that specific vulnerability. To give you an example, if there is a vulnerability that is a critical vulnerability that is being discovered today, you need to have the capability to go back in time to see if that specific vulnerability existed 3 months before. To give you an example of this would be the Heartbleed vulnerability that came out. Right now, that vulnerability is not new. It's been there for a long time. It's just that the hacker made it more visible today, right? In the last couple of years, but you need to make sure that when that vulnerability came out, I'm collecting all the relevant logs for me to go back in time to ensure that specific vulnerability events are being collected, right? And that's and you also need to have a platform in place to go back in time to tell you that, yes, you had a really weak SSL certificate notification from your SSH servers, and these are the logs associated with it, right? And finally, you also need to have the capability to test it in real time, right? As you collect event data, is it firing off, or is it giving you relevant information, or is it able to cater to the end results that you've actually derived based on use cases, right? Does it address your current use case, and will it also address a future use case that you may customize for further future requirements, right? And that's really, really important, because there's no point you having a template in place to detect a risk, but if that template is configured incorrectly, there's no point of having the template in the first place, right? So you need to make sure whatever rules, whatever policies are in place are configured correctly and are able to trigger an alarm once a specific condition is met. And for that, you need to be able to constantly test it, right? So that's why I say you need to have a system that's agile, you need to have a system that's intelligent, you need to have a system that's integrated, and the most important thing, you also need to have a system that is automated, right? So one of the things that we also miss is in terms of figuring out what is actually missing in my environment. For example, whatever logs that we are collecting today will be at a point in time. When I'm saying a point in time, will be a point in time in which we decided that we need to onboard that data, right? But what happens in an agile environment when new data sources come in, when a new VM comes in, when a new Nessus scanner comes in, or when a new um, honeypot comes in, right, within your organization? Are you able to detect that, and are you able to bring it into your environment and have that visibility as soon as it's connected to your network, right? And that is specifically one of the challenges, because if you look at some of the breaches that have happened, it's always been users connecting to a hotspot that they've never seen before, and that in turn had a vulnerability which they used to exploit that specific user. Most of the phishing attacks happen like that as well, right? Basically, you're connecting to a honeypot, or you're connecting to a hotspot, and then you have malicious content that is being traversed, and the user clicks on it, and then basically his machine is compromised. So you constantly need to monitor not just the logs, but the type of content, type of servers that are coming on board, right? And this predominantly happens when you have the capability of imbibing flows, because like they say, network flows never lie, right? Because they happen real time. You can delete logs, you cannot delete flow, you cannot hide any traffic that's traversing within your network. Any traffic that goes into your network is like a video surveillance, and the capability of you having flows within your organization and contextually and in real time being able to detect potential bad traffic or bad assets within your organizations, or assets you've never seen before within your organization, make a huge impact in detecting potential exploits within your organization. It could be as simple as an FTP server, which always communicated on port number 21, now suddenly started sending emails, right? And that's a profile change in a specific asset. And when that happens, you need to have the capability to detect that in real time. Or suddenly you see a lot of data traversing to a print server, and that print server is communicating to a bad IP outside on the internet, right? And this print server had never seen a communication on that specific port, right? So use cases like that, you need to be able to monitor those use cases in real time, right? And as we move on, like I said in my previous statement, one of the key things for you to achieve all of this is for you to have the capability to have strong automation. Um, Today's immune system, right? If you look at the body's immune system, it has a lot of automation within it. How? If you want to go right, your brain says go right, and your body moves right, right? There's no reaction. I mean, there's no time to react. It's just instinctive. When something goes wrong, your body says, all right, you've got fever, here is the WBCs, get activated, fight against the bad stuff that's happening within your organization, within your body. And all of that happens seamlessly, right? And that's why I said you need a platform that is intelligent to do that, has the capability to integrate, and is very, very automated. So when it comes to automation, you want a platform that has the capability to automatically detect bad stuff within the event or the flow data that is thrown at it, right? You want that to happen using advanced analytics, and you want that to happen within a specific time frame. Most of the time, it needs to be real time, right? And the most important thing is, if you look at traditional SIEMs, you basically dumped everything into the SIEM, and then you basically came up with a plan on what you want to do with that data within the SIEM. But today, the threat landscape has changed, right? You basically have solutions like the big data that have moved on from being a traditional data store to now being an analytics capable engine for you to be able to run peer grouping, for you to be able to run machine learning on the system so that you can predict deviations from in the future by learning from the data of the past, right? Now, that is what you need to do in terms of automation, right? You need to be automatically able to predict the future based on the learnings that you've had in the past, right? So that you are response ready, you are future ready, right? You also need to have the capability to integrate with other solutions automatically. In case a potential bad happens within your organization, you need to have the solution to talk to an external solution. Like, for example, if there is a connection to a bad IP, you need to tell your firewall automatically to block that bad IP. Or if there is a bad risky user within your organization that is doing risky unauthorized activity within your organization, you need to have the capability to talk to the Active Directory or a privileged user management solution to revoke that specific user from the network, right? And it's only then you will achieve that seamless layer of automation. So I've put together a small slide on what is the reference of automation that we're talking about. So let's say, for example, you're going to have network traffic that is detected a malware. Your intrusion prevention system has detected a specific malware intrusion, a payload within that network packet, and it basically is targeted to an endpoint. And when I ran a scan on that endpoint, I figured out that endpoint is actually not patched for that specific vulnerability. Now, I need to be able to seamlessly go ahead and quarantine that machine till the time that machine is come up to a state of completely patched, right? Now, that integration today, all the security vendors are collaborating, right? Earlier, it used to be that they were competing, but if you look at the industry right now, the vendors are also trying to collaborate, because everyone's realized that if you can never run a security program within an organization in silos. So the ability for solutions to talk to each other, especially with the REST API platform, is becoming even more stronger today. So the level of automation within within an incident response and an analytic solution are getting really, really strong. The ability for the analytic engine to detect a potential bad and to basically go ahead and make the necessary changes within the organization in real time without the need of an analyst to be in place is becoming even more relevant. But on the flip side, you also want to make sure what is the acceptable level of change within your organization. You don't want every incident to be remediated automatically, right? Because you may end up creating a denial of service for yourself. So you need to get into you need to be able to define your risk. And that's the statement I made in a few slides earlier. What is the level of risk if I'm able to go ahead and automatically block a specific user from my organization network, right? What is the risk? The risk is the user will not have access to that data. But if that user is your CIO, That's a huge risk, because you need to make sure that you are able to give availability of a specific asset to a user based on his profile, right? So you need to be really mindful on what is the level of risk you are capable of taking before you implement a solution with a lot of automation in place. Having said that, going forward, the future is all going to be automation, right? Because it's impossible for an analyst to do all this specific activity on a daily basis. If you look at the number of incidents, even if you tune it down by educating the system on your current environment and educating the systems on the current assets, you're still going to see a relative number of incidents. Let's assume in a large enterprise, you're going to see about 60, 70 incidents a day. Now, based on the criticality, based on the severity of those specific incidents, you may want to create an automation strategy. For incidents that are low key, you may want to adopt an automated strategy, whereas incidents that are high key, for example, any communication to a known bad IP address from a contractor zone, you want to terminate, you want to make sure that you adopt automation to resolve that problem without the analysts having to intervene within for investigation, right? And of course, all of this ties back to automation in terms of reporting as well, right? You need to be able to show to auditors, you need to be able to show to your CIO, your CISO, the level of compliance. Your CISO will have to go ahead and show to the board the level of security compliance that is currently within the organization, right? So earlier, security was a nice to have, but now it's become a must have, right? It's becoming a board discussion. It's changing businesses. It's now becoming a business enabler. People are showcasing the level of security within their policies and procedures for them to onboard new client contracts within the organization. So you need to have security that is demonstrable. You cannot have security that is verbal anymore. And for that, you need to have a really strong automated reporting framework that at any point is able to show you the level of compliance or the level of security within your organization. And the last phase is the augmented investigation phase. Now, the reason why we say it's augmented investigation is, think about it, right? An incident happens, there is a bad IP address, that specific bad IP address, what does the analyst do on a daily basis, right? If he sees that this is a bad IP address based on a threat indicator or a threat intelligence feed that he's currently subscribing to, he basically goes ahead and uses the best analytical engine available to him, which is Google or VirusTotal, and he puts in this specific IP address to get more intelligence, get more information on what exactly is this bad IP, what exactly does this URL mean, and what exactly does this URL categorize into. Is it a ransomware? Is it a malware? Is there a deviation? Is there any additional context to it? But then it's only so much that an analyst can do, because on an average, there are about 3,000 pages of documents with respect to security that are written on every week, right? Now, that being the case, an analyst being up to date with all the security trends, any deviation, and looking for information, it's the ability for information to come to the analyst, right? Instead of analysts going and searching for Google and VirusTotal, there may be some information that is present outside that can add additional context to that specific bad IP apart from Google and VirusTotal, right? So like I said, it's the ability for you to augment a potential indicator of compromise with to the analyst for that form in place. Form evolve, right? Because data that's available in security context. So AI will definitely drive the security industry going forward. And of course, you need to have that augmented platform within your organization for you to leverage that to adopt the future. Now, to tie it all together, we define a threat lifecycle of a potential and So you have really where you've tried to put together for your in mind was users are we and is able to detect it accurately. And from a right of boom, in case something happens, am I today ready to go ahead and adopt and communicate a specific breach? How do I report that specific breach? Do we have the capability within the organization, and do we have enough information to triage and to triage correctly, right? And in case there is a potential bad, that is, in case there is a security incident that has happened and it's happening right now, do I have the capability to contain it as soon as possible? Do I have the capability to report it? And do I have the capability to report it to the right person in the right time frame that is defined by my compliance? And if I don't do that, what is the impact that this specific exploit is going to cause within my organization, right? So we're covering a complete cycle here, a potential incident cycle, starting from being more predictive and being more reactive. We are moving from a phase from the right to the left, where we're trying to be more proactive and at the same time have a very, very strong remediation phase in place. And most importantly, whatever that you're doing in terms of incident handling, in terms of automation, in terms of analytics, needs to be repeatable. You need to be able to go ahead and repeat that same process again and again, right? Regardless of the skill set of the analyst, regardless of the intuition of the analyst, regardless of the number of resources that you have within the organization. You need a solution, you need a platform which you can leverage that can help you build a security knowledge base, which the analysts, new analysts can go ahead and reuse and basically create a process that is repeatable, right? Think about it. In a scenario today, if there is a potential breach or if there's a potential exploit that is detected, first you need to go ahead and figure that out. Then you need to, once you figure it out, you need to make sure that you're able to communicate to the right guys to make sure that specific machine is removed from the network. And then get that specific only server that was the potential problem for the exploit, right? So all of this takes time, right? So we are trying to we want to make sure you have a platform that reduces that time of exposure and creates a process that is repeatable, where in case there is something goes wrong, I can automatically go ahead and quarantine that zone, that specific machine. Especially in the kill chain, you always want to make sure that you're able to detect an attack in the first phase, which is the recon phase, rather than in the weaponization and the propagation phase. Your end goal is to always be able to detect something that is potentially bad within the recon phase. And that's the reason they say that you don't need to know the complete anatomy of the attack. You only need to know an indicator of the anatomy of the attack before you are actually able to accurately predict what the attack is. And for that, you need to have a system that understands the anatomy of the attack. And for that, you need to have the latest and the greatest security information available to you within the organization and correlate that against the specific events that you're collecting within the organization and proactively, repeatably be to detect. And that's when you're going to, in the knock, look for, always had to look for something that is wrong. Whereas today, the knock, the network operation centers, they basically look at triggers that can cause a potential problem within the organization, within the network, right? They look at small indicators, drop packets, 10 drop packets. I know there's going to be a network latency issue, so they proactively fix that. And that's where the security operations, you actually don't breach, you own remediation strategy, potential incidents that if these having the analyst from being more pre, it's always or millions of data, the risk if that specific strategy, right? The ability for you to monitor risky users and be able to demonstrate the level of safety in the organization. Additional advancing more and more in the organization, incident response and orchestration based on potential breaches for you to disclose, for you to ensure you have a proper disclosure strategy in place. Basically, is a of simplifying security, intelligence, and analytics, and to be able to have a solution in place that is simple, automated, intelligent, and orchestrated. And the most important thing, being able to repeat all of that time and time again, regardless of the type of breaches within your organization. Right? Cool. So I'm happy to take questions. Open the floor for questions, please.
Oh, he doesn't have.
Any questions?
Don't see any on the call. Strongly urges the free trials and Steam platform. This is you see if you. Okay, I think there are no questions, Roshan. So thank you very much for your time, and folks on the call, I hope you found this useful. So again, visit the QRadar page on ibm.com, try out the QRadar demos, try out the QRadar free trial, sign up for the trials, and we'll be more than happy to help you move forward from there.